Welcome back to see you on the show. Delighted to see you again. In our warm up to today's talk, as always, we talk about CrossFitting and how Peter and I may have a CrossFit workout at GAC this year. Boom! You want to
All
get
are invited. All are
swollen
invited.
like Peter Myers? You got to work out with Doug and Peter Myers at GAC 2026. But before that, today we're going to talk about board renewal with Peter Myers. And we get a little bit of an inside look at the consulting work that you and Dee Dee do. So, Peter, welcome back. Tell me, unpack what are you talking about? Board renewal. What do you mean?
It's interesting time that we're in right now. We're seeing more board members transition off the board at a faster clip than ever before. This is a time for boards to go, what's next for us, right? We have the CEO position changing all the time. So what I thought we could talk about, Doug, is like, how could a board do this, right? Or the kinds of common topics that they have or questions like, how do we go to the next level? How do we renew ourselves? So I was thinking we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know you got a presentation deck that we can look at and really use this as a learning experience for our listeners who tend to be executives, but maybe this session they would share with their board. Is that what you're thinking, Peter?
If they want to watch two handsome, funny, smart guys go back and forth, then they can share this all they want. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Peter, you just broke up. I wasn't able to understand.
No, I think
Oh,
it's a good, we're always, one of our main strategies and orientations as a company, DDJ, is like content education first. Oh, like rich and relevant content that educates the market. If we all get a little bit better, then we're winning. If you want to go to the next level, great, give us a call. And I can't tell you how often we have people go, hey, I read that article or I use this thing, and I'm like, excellent, good. Call us when you're ready to maximize it. So that's what I thought we could do. I think it's a great platform for us to do it.
all right. Well, so my first question is starting at the top. When you talk about board performance,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about what it's a hard question to answer because there's 4,500 credit unions out there, and they can all have a little bit different definition of performance. So what we have here, and I'll share my screen, is like I call it operating parameters. Like let's just get clear on how we're going to define certain things. So if we say board, I'm going to talk about board alignment and board performance. Board alignment is the degree to which we address and align on the most strategically relevant issues. I'm going to unpack it just a little bit. When we say the degree to which, what we're saying is like, how deep do you go? Do you go surface level, right? Address and align on. Are we unpacking it and addressing and then aligning and decisioning on certain kinds of things? The most strategically relevant issues. What we're saying there is today's content, the most strategically relevant content for a board to discuss today will be different than in 3 years from now, is different than it was 3 years ago. And so what we're trying to say is, all right, do you have a mechanism, a process for board renewal to then align on these things as they come up or as proactively you want to address it? Which is different. And you said board performance, which I love. How do you define performance for a board of a not-for-profit organization? It's a little hard. Here's what we would offer. If you were a board and you wanted to say, how do we perform? We would say the measurement of their governing impact, meaning they have policy decisions, and what is the measurable output of that or impact of that on the org's performance, or how effectively does a board declare and frame priorities? Just had this conversation this week with the board. This is important and this is important. They both can't be the most important. So let's talk through that. And then there's third, fourth, fifth, etc. kind of priorities. How do we work through those? So the effectiveness that they declare, this is number one and this is number five, for example. And then how they work, how well they are, how effective, the efficacy of their fiduciary. Are they making sure we're doing the right thing for the money? This is
Hmm.
what we would say as board performance. I'm going to offer you something, Doug, if you're okay with it here. It does not mean, board alignment does not mean, well, we agree on everything, right? Which is really like the notable absence of disagreement. I can't tell you how often we've had boards go, yeah, we're very aligned. We're very aligned. And I'm like, well, when's the last time you disagreed on something? I don't know. 2050, or whatever they might say, right? It's a little while. Every single time that a board tells me that, when we dive deeper, again, that's the degree to which we dive deeper into it. There's some spots where there's friction's not the right word, but like, hey, I don't feel aligned on this, or I don't feel aligned on that. But they just aren't saying it necessarily, or
Mm.
they don't have the platform, or whatever the reason might be. All right, now how about this one? Board performance. It does not mean, and I've literally heard this probably 30 times in my career. Well, obviously, the organization putting huge points on the board, so obviously we're successful. And it's not quite the same, right? Because you can have an ineffective board, but still a well-performed organization. It's not ideal. I wouldn't recommend it. But those are some definitions that we use to operate. So I'm curious your perspective on them, Doug.
I would be interested in examples as always, and if you can say names, great. If you can't, that's fine too. Of when you've seen these things, like I saw a board and I knew it wasn't aligned, and here's what I noticed, and then the other side.
I'll give you one that I was talking with about the CEO with this morning. So it's as fresh as I can. I won't name names, but it's about compensation. And, compensation, surprise, surprise, is a sensitive topic.
Hmm.
And this organization has a declared comp philosophy and a declared comp philosophy that does not match with what their organization's performance is, meaning they think the CEO is excellent, but they only want to pay at the market price.
The midpoint, they want to, I have heard so many CEOs tell me they only want to pay me at the midpoint and they want to make sure our performance is in the top quartile.
Yeah. And so it's really just like, all right, so we got to unpack that a little bit. And in this particular instance, we do compensation research for them, advise them on comp philosophy, but it's the board's decision, right? The board's decision. I think the problem in this institution here is that they have a disconnective, ineffective CEO performance evaluation and a incentive scorecard, both of which we're not a part of. And I think that's part of the problem is that they're disjointed from how they decide the decisioning process for pay. And so that's the conversation that we're in this morning is like the organization's successful, but the performance of the board is having a governing impact where the CEO may choose to leave,
Oh, wow.
which is and that's a the, the if that were the case, let me kind of fast forward it, then you can outside objectively go, okay, that was not a performing board. They didn't do one, two, and three, etc. So that it has a measurable impact on the organization.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's probably a difficult journey for you to get the board to go down. Like you're engaged with the CEO, you said.
So
So
I was just chatting with the CEO. We are engaged with the board on doing comp research, but I think what we're going to do, and as a consultant, it's a little tricky. Like we're trying to stay in we stay in our lane, but also Dee Dee and I, our company, we're not really known for staying in our lane. Like we're kind of break the lanes sometimes,
well, you are
and
the
so
first one to bring a presentation to see you on the show. So I staying not staying in your lane. I like it. I like it,
hey, you know
Peter.
what?
Don't change it.
I think that's a great example. So what we're going to do in this instance is go, hey, board, you're not asking for our opinion on this. Can I offer one still though? Here's some free consulting. You should take a look at this, take a look at this, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to help you, right? And if you want to help work with us, that's great. But I think you need to have the degree to which they align on the most important and strategically relevant issues. That's something they're not aligning on very well.
Well, what's I mean, you said that you're seeing more board turnover now than I assume ever. Uh, what do you think's behind that? What's behind this renewal? Is the CEO changing, or is it just the aging of the baby boomers? What is this?
I love the question because, I started thinking about this in preparation for our conversation, like what are some of the driving factors? And I'm going to kind of put it into a couple of categories. One is when a board starts to say, "Hey, let's be in a renewal conversation," and maybe they don't use that word, there's an internal or usually an external kind of force. Okay, so let's say there's an internal or external force that like awakens a perspective, like, "Ooh, we got to kind of do something about this." The internal is when there's transition in the chair role or massive transitions on the board. So in January, I worked with the board because half the board was brand spanking new. They had three, four people roll off last year or resign from the board for all kinds of various reasons. And the board found itself in a position of like, we got to go to the next level. What does that look like? Hey, we're new. Some of you are seasoned. What is that? So there was transition. Part of that too is because of the generational things. Like baby boomers are now well into retirement. Many of them, the I think the youngest baby boomers, you probably know this better than me, Doug, are at that retirement age-ish, right there. For some of them, if they're working with you, maybe they can retire sooner. Is that right?
I like it. Potentially, I make no promises, but the odds
Well,
are
it's an expense conversation too, right?
the
Like
odds
you
are
can
in
re
your favor.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, so there's that. Or when a CEO transitions. So I just yesterday, again, I'm in a CEO performance evaluation conversation with the board. The board chair and I debriefed afterwards, and one of the challenges that this organization found itself in is that the last couple of years with its prior CEO is that there's just a lot of tension. And I said to the board chair, and I said, look, I'm just going to be real straight with you. I think the absence of doing an evaluation like we're doing now probably created an environment where there's a lot of friction. And so the board needs to look at taking this opportunity with this new CEO and going, all right, let's not make those mistakes again. That's one mistake. Let's do some other. Let's get to a renewal conversation. A third kind of variable internal stimulus, I would say, is if the strategy of the organization is not performing, right? And we had this is maybe about 2 years ago now. Had a board chair call. It was the exec committee. Board chair call and said, "Hey, I want to find out about your CEO performance evaluation." I'm like, "Okay, that's great. I'm happy to sell those kinds of things, but let's just make sure it's the right thing for you. Make sure we're the right partner. Tell me what's going on." And he's like, "We're just not performing." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I already knew. I looked at their numbers, and they had negative ROA before like it was cool. The last like year or so, a lot of organizations, a lot of credit risk hitting the balance sheet, all that. I get it, a lot of organizations are still earning money, but hey, there's losses. But this was a year before all that happened. And they're like, we don't know if that's right or, our CEO says it's common. And I said, I pulled up our dashboard and I said, it's not. You're the only one in your market that's got negative 40 basis points ROA. And that's bad, especially since you're shrinking too. Like it was really bad.
Hmm.
So anyways, long story short, the board had to go through some really hard conversations with themselves because they were culpable in not overseeing the CEO properly and the strategy's performance. So that's an internal kind of stimulus. Another externally, regulators come in and they go, "Hey, you guys are ineffective," or, "You're a knucklehead. Why are you on the board?" Or, "You've got these people leading these portions of the business and they're not qualified," or whatever. That is very rare. Like, I think for the regulators to flex in those instances, it's kind of egregious. To be honest, Doug, I think there's probably one or two more instances they could do that to kind of flex their muscle on there, or the landscape shifts, right? Maybe a sponsor company for a SEG, a sponsor company for a credit union, maybe they shift. Those are all reasons for a board to go, "Oh, we should take a look at this thing." And I'll kind of end this point with those are reactive circumstances. What I didn't mention there is like a board saying, "Hey, let's get in a conversation about evolving." regularly. So I can talk more about that if you want it, but that's a
Well,
long-winded.
I want you to go into, he or she called you because I think they were looking at an assessment.
Yeah,
And I wonder, you had that conversation, you figured out that the ROA was negative. They were having significant performance issues. I'd love to know, where did that go? And then let's talk about assessments more. Like,
yeah,
is that where that went, and how did they use those? Like, I think that the assessment idea is really a critical one to kind of get some data around this super nebulous stuff. Like, which one are you, right? You can
yeah,
tell if you have negative ROA, but you can't tell if you're just, not being as effective as you could be,
yeah.
right? You're being somewhat effective, but not as effective as you could be. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so in that particular instance, that story or case study, I might say, is more of an anomaly, but we get them like every 18 months. And so I've had one even more recent than that story where the board may even not have access or insight into how do I objectively rank us, right? Because usually their source of information is from the CEO, and sometimes that's maybe heavily curated. Again, these are kind of dramatic examples, but from a best practice standpoint, I still think the highest performing organizations, too many of them aren't looking at as much competitive analysis data as they could. And that's where, we try to equip boards with, hey, we'll show you, we got a cool dashboard, and we show them, hey, this is where you're stacked. Let's define the peer group that you want.
How do you do that? Can you show us one of those? Like, I don't know if
Um,
that's something you're ready for, but like, how would you? That's very interesting. I don't understand how you could do that.
all right, this is exclusive.
Exclusive for See You on the Show. You
See
heard
you
it
on the
here.
show. This is not what I was prepared to chat about, but I am going to chat about it because I am pretty excited about it. So this is for right now, it's called beta here. So our CU industry KPI dashboard. So this is all the call report data put into a data warehouse that is lightning speed, and it's got pre-built kinds of things to work through and look at competitively where we are. And so I'm gonna just randomly go down here. Let me just pick like I've never heard of Evanston Firemen's Credit Union, but let's just do this one. So they're 2 million. We'll pick on a $2 million institution. But I can look at them over the last 13 years. What's their performance been? Over this is like, okay, they had a bunch of COVID money. Look at that ROA, it's going on here. Like they haven't really grown literally in the last 13 years. Here we are at 2 million, just under 2 million in assets. And 13 years ago, we're at the exact same kind of performance. So again, I'm picking on this one because I don't think they'll watch this show. But this is a good conversation for the board to look at what's been happening with our growth. How about membership growth? Okay, they've got 150 members. That is less than what they had over time. And I'll put it this way. I'll put it this way, Doug, that if you think about a percentile, 100 percentile, in my experience, the bottom quartile of percentile organizations, boards don't realize that they're in that bottom quartile.
Hmm.
The top quartile, I think, realize that they are part and parcel because they go, let's take a look at our strategy. Let's look at the competitive analysis. Let's get in this rigorous, again, the degree to which they address and align on the strategically relevant issues. So that is, whenever I show that to boards, they usually go, okay, wait. Let's spend some more time there. Let's dive deeper into it. So that kind of reveals a conversation.
Yeah, I got questions. So because that was really interesting. I love some numbers. So it seems like your market and your exec team could be causing those numbers to be potentially great. And yet you have that yes silence in the boardroom maybe where everyone just kind of goes along because they're seeing great performance. But you'd said earlier that that doesn't necessarily mean you are you're functioning as a top end board. So where do you go from there? Is there another
Yeah.
level that says, all right, this is a great board and getting great results?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do what I typically do, Doug, which is a long-winded answer, but I got to kind of build up to it, if you don't mind. And it's a little bit just as a precursor here. You give a guy like me a microphone, and I'll just take it and I'll run with it, and I love it. Let's talk
Go,
about it.
Peter, go.
I love doing this work. Okay. So in order to get into that kind of sensitive conversation, we got to kind of build up to it to say, hey, board, let's get out of this performance conversation first and let's get into a learning conversation. And so what we say is let's get into what we call a board leadership dojo. A dojo is Japanese word for place of training or place of awakening. And so I got kind of a whole long spiel about it, but I'm just going to say, hey, boards, we're going to get into a learning conversation to help move the organization forward. That's the operative idea. So it's a place that we're learning concepts, skills. How do we as a board, not Peter, but how do we as a board define high performing? Because every organization is a little different. And then what it requires is that people have full participation and retention of information, meaning, like, we're going to say this thing and you got to apply it in future conversations. That's the idea.
Mhm.
And I'll hit these kind of 2 points down here. Let me turn my pen on. Unbiased teacher. What's really cool about our job is like, I got kind of a clean objective, right? Here to help you move forward. I'm not trying to like pick on you or pick on her or build this thing up. That's too messy. I don't play that politics game. I'm here to help the organization move forward. What that requires from us is to then provide some feedback sometimes that maybe doesn't sound great, but like that's honestly what you're paying me for. You're paying me for my opinion to help you move forward. And then I got the students and learners highlighted here. So if there's a teacher, usually people go, well, there must be students. And we say, it's like, well, we can all be students, but we all can't necessarily, we're not all learners. And the story I tell is that when I was a senior in high school, again, this is not one of my proudest moments, Doug, but I was in English lit class. And I was like, when am I gonna Beowulf? Like, what's the relevance to Beowulf in my life in the future? I'm like, and in the wisdom of my 17-year-oldness, I decided right then and there, is like, I don't need this. And I'm going to do everything I can to not do work in this class, but still like decently pass. And so I was a student, but not a learner. Now, what happened in this class? Well, I had my, at that time, girl that I was flirting with eventually became my girlfriend. She gave me her homework and I just turned it in. That was great, all those things. So I was crafty. I was skillful in a way, some traits that I'm not necessarily proud of, but that's happened. So we say to the board, you got to be learners, you got to be active, and we define learners. When we go through this, okay, yeah. So when we go through this, then it gets into you mentioned board alignment. So let's align on, well, what are we going to align on? And let me show you this. So we have an assessment. You mentioned an assessment. This is a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more palatable way for boards to engage in a performance alignment conversation. How do we get to the next level? Because we're assessing the board. I'm not pointing my finger at Doug, right? I'm not, or we're not, or each other aren't. So we look at like, okay, well, what are we going to measure? So we look at categories. Let's look at these best practice categories, and then we have evaluative content inside of them. Deliver it, Doug, in a dashboard so that they can play with it. And honestly, that's probably one of the best features of it because it's not a 35-page PDF that you got to go and read through and no one really likes. I don't like it. Um, so they work through this conversation, and one of the things that inevitably comes up is we're not on in those instances that we were asking earlier, we're not aligned on the strategy, or we're not effectively overseeing the CEO. Okay, now let's talk about how to get there. What do you need to do on the board? What are the skill sets we need? Let me just talk about that for a second. I think a safe way to be in a succession conversation is to go, what are the technical proficiencies, or as we like to call them, functional domain expertises we need on the board in the future, and what do we have today? One board I worked with, 7 out of 9 of them were CPAs. They had a lot of accounting experience. So if we were to go to if one of them transitioned off and we wanted to kind of advertise or recruit or however we wanted to, nominate someone, we probably wouldn't be looking for another CPA. Fair
Mhm.
enough. Okay, great. Well, what would we be looking for? And so we have a list, and I'll show you the list here. We got a whole list. I think it's like 30 something functional domain expertises. Of course, now you got to have AI, right? You got to have AI on there. Another one you got to have on there is cybersecurity. And so what we say, this is the list, and we have whole definitions of these, but it's good for boards to go, what is important to our strategy so that we can understand it, effective, right? Support the organization in deploying that strategy. And so this is a representation of those skills. So again, my long-winded answer, I think, to your question.
I've forgotten the question at this point, Peter.
I kind of forgot the question too. You were asking about performance and like how do they get there and how do we measure it? I think another tool that I showed you, that performance dashboard, is to just show them where they stack rank inside of their peer group from some of these numbers. So for example, if our asset quality numbers are going in the wrong direction, but our revenue numbers are also going in the right direction, we got to look at that in totality, right? With membership growth, with all these things. Too often, I think boards, and honestly, Doug, I think executives too are very guilty of this, is they get kind of myopically focused, like one measurement, as opposed to the what I call the economic engine. What's happening inside the all the pieces to move this engine forward.
All right, I'm going to ask you to let's give our listeners an action item, an
Yeah.
idea. Like if
Yeah.
you're going to do, if you're going to question your board, not in a negative way, just in an effectiveness way. What is something that you might do, before year end, to evaluate where you are?
I love it. Here's what I didn't know if we would get to this conversation, but I'm going to put this up
We're
here.
barely making it.
We have to ask ourselves, how do we want to run? I wrote an article for the CU Times, I think it was last year, the characteristics of high-performing executive teams. And the unedited article was like, to be clear, I had some very good editors more nicely word what my intent was, but the unedited article was like, hey, not every executive team can be high performing, and just like get comfortable with that. Because by definition, high performance means you stand far and above,
Bell
right? Yeah,
curve.
like a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
Distribution. And so, like, if you're mediocre, like that's actually kind of likely. And that's okay. And there's plenty, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. There's plenty of people out there. It doesn't sound great though. It doesn't, no one is
Yeah.
like, oh, I love that
Objective
pill,
achieved.
right? Exactly. But look, we just got to be really clear, what do we want? And so to answer your question, action item from a board perspective, I'll even say from an executive team perspective is like, let's calibrate, right? Do we want, and we'll, when I have this slide here to say, how do we want to be in feedback with each other? To what performance do we want to be? Do we want to be in the trophy generation, where after the soccer game, everyone gets an orange slice and
Or
a
after
piece
the
of paper?
podcast, Doug sends Peter a participation trophy.
Oh
Way to go,
man,
Peter.
I
Way to
would love it
go.
if you sent me one of those. I'd put it right there on my wall. Or do we want to like Olympic level performance, like world class podium? That's what we're after. And then there's a range. And to be clear, there's only a couple of people on the podium. This is the way it works. There's a lot more in the middle, and there's some ones that are on the bottom side of things. And maybe I'll show you kind of my bias a little bit. So I've always coached my kids' teams, whether whatever the sport was. A couple of years ago, my youngest son's baseball team, a kid, it was his first year in baseball. It was my son's second year, and he's like, "Hey, so are we gonna get some of those trophies?" And I was like, and I realized I was the only coach in our division that wasn't doing that. He
Mm.
helped me realize that because I'm just not oriented that way. I wasn't raised that way. I don't raise my kids that way. And I was like, you know what, buddy? Like if we won first place, I would get you a trophy. I didn't say, I don't think I said that. I said something nicer to the 7 or 8 year old that he was. But I'm just not organized towards the trophy kind of side. The stimulus that we have is like always going to the next level, whatever
Mhm.
that may be. And I think that's a good conversation for boards to be in. Is like not, hey, the organization's successful, so we must be. It's like, well, how do you know you're successful? Like let's take a deeper dive at that. So that's my long-winded answer for that.
All right. And if you want to know more about that, you go to dgjmyers.com and learn more.
That's
Right?
right. And we got a new website. We just rolled out in the last couple of weeks or something, which is excellent. It's beautiful.
Excellent. Well, that dashboard you showed me was fascinating. My prediction is that some of our listeners are going to see that and go, "Hey, I want to know more about that. Show what do we look like on that? What are the insights that you have that I don't have? And what are the performance attributes that I want to be looking at? I bet you that's going to happen. Well, I'll be interested to see."
I hope they do. I'll tell you, we include it in our strategy programs because it helps. One of the things about strategy development, I know we're kind of wrapping up, but I can't help myself. Again, I got a microphone, so I'm going to say it, is that if you want to get better at your strategy for your organization, I think one of the most helpful ways to do that is to look at the strategy of other organizations, our peers or competitors, best in class, worst in class. What are the lead and lag indicators that results in where they are today? How can we deconstruct that? And then if we look at our organization more objectively, what can we reveal about where we're missing it and where we're winning, right? And I think that starts a really good board and executive conversation. So,
As always, Peter Myers from DDJ Myers, thank you for your amazing content. I love the way you and Didi serve the credit union movement. Really, really love the content that you bring to see you on the show. So I hope you listeners enjoy it as much as I do, and we'll do it again in months coming. Thank you, Peter.
take care, Doug. Thanks, everyone.